So in this video, I want to talk about euphemisms and the use of euphemisms and why euphemisms matter because it's a way of often not telling the truth while kind of telling the truth. So a euphemism is an indirect word or expression substituted for one considered to be too harsh or blunt, that's too truthful, when referring to something unpleasant or embarrassing. And so an example might be like that person passed away rather than they died. It's like when you say you go to the bathroom rather than say that you are urinating or defecating. It just sounds better. But I put this out on my community board the other day. What are the worst examples of euphemisms or doublespeak that the Russians have used? Now, when they use these, very often they're trying to cover up that it's not as bad as what they're really doing or that kind of thing. So I had a number of comments, 87 comments, and I'm going to go through these. I haven't read all of them, so I'm not going to highlight. I'm just going to we're going to work through these together and kind of think about what's being said when they say this. I liked when Lavrov said we are trying to stop a war that was launched against us. That's not really a euphemism, but it is really a way of saying, of denying responsibility for your own active starting of the war, like for your own responsibility for it, and that's what's going on. A couple of the replies here, we're only defending ourselves from Ukrainian aggression when they're crossing the border. Why does Ukraine have statues? Well, this is somebody that's going to be arguing about the other side. They love talking about Stephen Bandera, and this is not a euphemism, but this is a way to redirect the conversation because they want to make a different point or try to associate with the Nazis or something like that. Stephen Bandera was a person who, if you don't know, worked with whoever for Ukrainian independence, and that could even mean the Nazis who, when Hitler then broke the Molotov-Ribbentrop treaty and attacked the Soviet Union, the very next day he went to, he asked Hitler, or requested of Hitler, Ukrainian independence. That's why people revere Bandera, because they were talking about Ukrainian independence, and that's what he was fighting for. It wasn't because he wanted to be Nazi or something along those lines. Another person here, Lavrov is correct. Sure. Okay. We're on day one of here's one, special military operation. So a special military operation is the preferred phrase. It's so preferred that if you use the word war in Russia, you can actually go to jail for that because they're banning the word war. Generally, when something is banned, you want to understand why it's banned, and then, yeah, there's a reason why that's the case. Now, what's happening in Ukraine fits the textbook definition of a war and just war theory and international understandings of what's war, but you can't say that. And again, the reason you can't say that is because it's, again, a euphemism is a mild or indirect word or expression substituted for one considered to be too harsh or blunt, and they don't want to show the harshness or bluntness. Okay, too many to count. Peace negotiations equals Ukrainian surrender. And that's actually what they are referring to, because if you're not willing to just simply capitulate, you're not interested in peace, the way that they talk about that. Humanitarian evacuation. Yeah, it really means kidnapping, not just children, kidnapping or removing, deporting adults and children alike. And kidnapping children is deplorable. Russians equals Russian-speaking Ukrainians. Wow, this is really good. Karsten LKJR 2540. You did a great job here. Russians equals Russian-speaking Ukrainians, just as much as it means Russian. So anyone who is part of that, and so to the degree that you have Russian speakers, Zelensky grew up speaking Russian as his primary language, and it was a very common thing in Ukraine. But this is how part of the way that Putin wants to continue to expand. Liberating Mariupol means pulverizing Mariupol. Wow, that's pretty much what happened. Shifting to a more defensible position means running away. DPR and LPR detachments are slave soldiers, and that's really forcibly conscripted Ukrainians with this LPR and DPR, and that is not exclusively what happened, but it has happened. Slightly damaged in a storm means sunk by Ukrainians. That's awesome. Yeah. Or, careless cigarette. I mean, that must have been what's happening was, Yeah, it got hit by a missile. We fear a NATO nuclear first strike means we're annoyed by not being able to terrorize and invade members of NATO and so on and so forth. Okay, that's pretty good. Got to be a special operation. Special operation is probably the leading euphemism here, and yeah, it's really there's far more than that. Okay, they talk about evacuating civilians when they're deporting them to filtration camps. Okay, these taking these citizens into local communities and offering employment when they're being offered forced labor, giving children a chance to go to summer camp when they're actually abducting them, or they're taking them and they're housing them is some of the language that's been used. Them labeling themselves as protectors and liberators. The Ruski Mir in itself is the finest example of doublespeak. Yes, the Russian world. We're liberating the people of Ukraine when liberating means flattening villages, organizing a referendum when this means having an armed soldier on your doorstep along with that ballot. Yeah, that's a problem. Just today, I heard make North America safe from fascism, which means establish a military presence in Mexico and take back Alaska. I think this is probably the grandmothers that were appealing to Putin, and that was a big propaganda thing here recently. As well as as I went to elementary school, teachers weren't allowed to say that the USSR attacked Poland together with Germany. USSR was liberated. But if you look at the history of it, the USSR made that shady deal with Germany and then they carved up Poland. So, yeah, I mean, if you can't speak truth, like if you bind someone from being able to actually articulate the truth, you're scared of it, and there's a reason that you're scared of it because it's probably not going to break your way. Okay, goodwill gesture. Yes, when they liberated what was the island? Snake Island. They liberated Snake Island and then they left because they couldn't hold on to Snake Island, and then they gave it back as a goodwill gesture. No, no, no. That means that you had to retreat. Did you miss the part where the NATO head literally just admitted this war was started because of NATO expansionism and that NATO refused not to expand and to include Ukraine? Well, let's talk about that because this seems to be a very common Russian propaganda point. That same NATO head also confirmed that the Russian propaganda that NATO was funding and arming and training. Okay, so this is somebody on the other side of the equation wanting to fight back with me. Okay, so NATO expansion is not that the West is trying to, let me see if I can gobble up these countries so that we can squeeze Russia. What Russia is doing is taking ground against the will of those in Ukraine. What NATO has done is offer you're welcome to join, and they freely join NATO because they are concerned about Russia. And so that's actually what's going on here. So it's not so that NATO is moving toward the Russian border. It's that these countries are fleeing from Russian tyranny. Do you understand? Like the Baltic states headlong wanted to get into NATO, right? So that they could be protected from Russia because they had experience with Russia. An attack on Sevastopol as though the target were the entire city or civilians included. That's interesting because the way that they describe things can make it seem more expansive or less expansive. We promise we're just playing war games, we're not going to attack, and then what happens? They attack. And they denounced it. I showed in one video where on RT, the day before the invasion, they were saying, the West. They keep saying that we're going to invade Ukraine. We're not going to invade Ukraine. What's wrong with them? And then, sure enough, what happened the next day? There were no apologies, by the way. Okay, this is, I think, my favorite. Everything is going according to plan. Now, they say that, although, okay, and I just talked about this in another video, Shoigu said that this conflict could last until 2025. If you just go into the first week of January, maybe even the second week of January 2025, that means that there were more than 1,000 days. There would be 50 3-week special military operations. Now, again, it was supposed to last for a few days and then a mop up in 3 weeks, and you're supposed to be done with it. So everything's not going according to plan, but they keep saying it as if you just keep saying it, people will believe it. Kiev regime. Okay, so the word regime here is really important too. So why do they use the word regime? Because it has negative connotations as opposed to the Kiev government or Kiev or whatever else. And if you said the Moscow regime, they would be upset about that as well. So it's just a way of denigrating. Same with Zelensky's army. It's kind of true. It is the army that Zelensky's over or in charge of, but still it's makes it sound like he is a dictator just kind of moving things around. Limited military operation. You made us do this, Ukraine. You wore a I don't understand that. You made us do this, Ukraine. Oh, gotcha. You made us do this. Like you caused us to do this. We didn't want to. Like we were forced, and that's the line that they. Yeah. Okay, and then Banderite regime is another example of the same kind of thing, or it's all because of Bandera. Here's another one, another comment to that. Let's go back into some of the replies and see if there's more. Um, okay, oh man, this is hilarious. I urge you to look up that word in the dictionary because you got no clue whatsoever. Because what word are we talking about? The brutal Galatia, the genocide of Poles, Jews. Okay, again, somebody like Yamina Stanish is going to be a troll who's never going to listen. So here's it. This is free beyond what we're also going to talk about. So, Jesus in the Gospels talks about in the Bible, he's talking about pearls before swine. At a certain point, like you got to decide: is this a real question, or are you just throwing your pearls before swine? Is it something that it's even worth addressing? So someone like this is not really interested in actually knowing the thing. He's just trying to make his point. When you see somebody who actually wants to know a thing, it's because they're asking a question and they're open to alternative ideas. I'm open to the idea that, for example, the United States or Ukraine could be using these kinds of euphemisms as well. Um, that's possible. And if so, what would that tell us about how we explain things as well? But when you see something like that, you know that it's not the person's not open. So you just leave that person alone. Boy, this person's pretty popular around here. So there's a lot that he had to say. Labeling themselves as protectors, or, well, look at this. He keeps showing up everywhere. Every time I look at replies, this same guy, he's probably half of my comments. So, okay. So that just proves that point. At any rate, I hope that helps you understand. Like, listen to the words, think through why they're saying what they're saying. Is it accurate? Like, if you're trying to gloss over the accuracy of what you're saying, ask yourself, why are you trying to gloss over the accuracy of what you're saying? And that'll tell you which side of the fence you're on. Okay, thank you for your time. Hope that helps. Hope that provides some extra context. Thank you for watching this. Thank you for the likes, the shares, the subscribes. Thank you for the coffees. I appreciate that. And thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.